Sometimes if you want something done right, you just have to do it yourself. Here are 19 reasons to watch the 1997 miniseries of The Shining. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Thanks so much for coming out and checking out this video. It's a pleasure to have you here, and you watching this is more than enough. But if you want to see some other things I get involved with, check the links in the description. You'll find my Stephen King quiz book, some of my fiction, the Constant Writers podcast, and my newsletter. Do check out any that seem of interest. So this time around we are wrapping up the adaptations from 1997, and we're covering the miniseries of The Shining that went out across 3 nights in that year on ABC in America. So this was written by Stephen King, directed by Mick Garris, starring Rebecca De Mornay, Steven Weber, Melvin Van Peebles, Courtland Mead.
Wait, leave me alone.
It's a project that is actually a lot better than you will probably remember, or a lot better than you think it would be, depending on whether you've seen it or not. And I'm going to try and explain why I think that with my 19 reasons in this video. Now, if you're worried about spoilers, if you haven't watched this series yet, don't be too worried about spoilers. There will be some reasons that would spoil a first time watch, but I will hide them behind a spoiler alert for you, so you can bail if you need to bail. You can either use the timestamp below to skip to the outro, or you can leave altogether. And of course, if you want to watch the whole thing, you can do that too. Now, at the time of recording, this one doesn't seem to be on any streamers anywhere, so you're either going to have to track down the DVD, or you're going to have to get a bit creative with your searches. But I know you can do both of those things, so good luck in your hunting for this little mini-series. Okay, that's enough intro waffle. Let's get into it. Here are my 19 reasons for you to watch The Shining miniseries. So when it comes down to a headline reason for watching this, I guess ultimately it's the motivations behind it. Why did this miniseries get made? And you probably already know that. Stephen King, of course, it's a Stephen King channel, he's been very vocal throughout his career about the fact that he isn't really into Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining. And you can kind of see why. While that movie, which I covered a while ago, is undoubtedly a masterpiece of horror cinema, it's quite lacking when it comes to being an adaptation of Stephen King's novel. And he created that story, he wrote that novel. That's probably why he's precious about it. He wanted to do something that was closer to his own story. So that's what he set about doing. And I think with Mick Garris directing, he actually achieved that. I mean, let's just list off some of the things we get in this miniseries that we don't get in Kubrick's version. The scary room is 217, not 237. There's croquet mallets. The hotel boiler plays a key part, and we will come to that later. There's the scrapbook. There's the hedge animals, which again we will come to later. We've got the party being the masked ball. We see flashes of the hotel's dark past. We get the wasp's nest incident, and perhaps most importantly, we get a much more nuanced transfer from page to screen of Jack and of Wendy and of their relationship and of their family unit and of their struggles through this horrific winter that they end up spending. And all of that done while being pretty damn creepy throughout. Across these 3 episodes, this dread-soaked atmosphere will really suck you in, particularly if you can get past the datedness and the network TV mid-90s-ness of it, which I think you can do. So interestingly, King actually had to get permission to make this, even though it's his own story. He had to get permission from Stanley Kubrick to do his own version of this. And the deal that they came down to was that King would stop bashing Kubrick's movie, save for the fact that he didn't like how Jack Nicholson basically seemed insane before he even got to the hotel. That was the deal. That was his only gripe he was allowed to air in public. Although I do wonder if that agreement might have lapsed, because I'm sure I've heard King say other things about Kubrick's version since then. But anyway, that's how this thing got made. King needed to ask permission to make an adaptation of his own freaking work. Now, the filming location for this miniseries is important and worthy of a reason. Why? Because they shot it at the Stanley Hotel, which is the very real Colorado hotel where Stephen King stayed, in room 217 no less, and had his head messed up, and what gave him the genesis to write the actual novel. And the hotel on screen, they managed to make it feel dark and weird and claustrophobic in a way that's kind of similar to the 1980 movie as well. Wait a minute, Stanley Hotel, Stanley Kubrick. What are the odds?
I actually find that rather comforting.
So of course the big difference here is Jack Torrance, and we really see his struggle in this miniseries. We see his struggle with his multitude of demons, the booze of course, but also regret over past mistakes, his frustrated ambitions, and just his feelings of inadequacy, I guess. And we see the hotel tap into all of those and use them to try and bring him down. We also see lots of real moments between him and Wendy and Danny, and how much he really does love his little family unit and how desperate he is to make it work. But trying to do that during a winter at the Overlook Hotel is just a bad combination for the Torrances. But actually in this, Jack is pretty likeable. Like, we see these little moments, like his smutty little dad joke about trimming bushes.
In fact, I used to trim her topiary at least once a week, sometimes twice.
Get away! Fly!
Did she have nice hedges, Daddy?
Oh, they were, yeah, well...
Or his bad Arnie impression.
I'll be back.
You like this guy, and it makes it hurt even more when we see him spiral and just crash out of control. So let's use that as a jump off to talk about the cast, and let's talk about Steven Weber, who plays Jack. Now, unsurprisingly, filling the role of Jack, there's a train going past. Train! Filling the role of Jack was difficult, because who in their right minds would want to play a character that is basically a remake of Jack Nicholson's portrayal of it in that Stanley Kubrick movie? Not many actors were up for that as a challenge. No big surprise there. Steven Weber was actually suggested to Mick Garris and Stephen King by Rebecca De Mornay, who'd already been cast as Wendy, and he was up for the challenge, and he ended up signing on just 4 days before they started filming. And from my view, I think he kills it. Yeah, he's a little bit 90s. This was done in the 90s though. But his character arc is great. As I mentioned previously, he's likeable, and I think his performance is really, really good. So I mentioned Rebecca De Mornay as Wendy, and she is also excellent. Obviously gives a very different performance to Shelley Duvall in the Kubrick version, but that's mainly because Rebecca De Mornay wasn't being psychologically abused throughout the filming process. You can really see that she desperately loves Jack, but desperately hates what's inside him, and desperately wants to leave the hotel because she knows what will happen if they stay. And you can see her trying to take some ownership and make those things happen. Also, not gonna lie, she looks absolutely banging in a roll neck jumper, just like Steven Weber looks absolutely banging in most of his outfits. This is a hot pair of Torrances, guys.
This is the happiest I've been since Danny was born.
So it is a shame then that their son Danny is played by Courtland Mead, quite possibly one of the most, if not the most, annoying child actor I have ever seen in anything, not just a King adaptation. I mean, look at him with his stupid pouty mouth, his stupid terrible haircut, his whiny nasal voice, like...
I didn't want to take the key again, Daddy. I wanted to keep my promise.
Blow your nose for fuck's sake.
Shut up! Do you hear me? Just shut up!
Sorry. No, actually, no, I'm not. Fuck you.
No!
So let's go through the rest of the cast, pick out some folk of note. So Melvin Van Peebles as Dick Halloran, he's okay, I guess. The real star for me is Cynthia Garris as the woman in room 217.
Hello, Danny. I've been waiting for you. We've all been waiting for you.
For my money, the most terrifying woman in the bathtub in the Overlook Hotel. Yeah. Elsewhere, we get a King cameo as the conductor of the orchestra, who happens to be called Gage Creed. We get Elliot Gould as the really shitty hotel owner, Stuart Ullman. And keep your eyes peeled for Sam Raimi at the gas station talking to Dick. And also Frank Darabont somewhere among the party guests, although I'll admit I didn't spot him. And listen carefully too. Do you recognise the voice that is voicing Jack Torrance's dad on the radio?
Cane him for it, Jackie. Make him take his medicine.
Do you recognise it? Yeah, you got it. Those are the dulcet tones of the sadly departed and much missed legend Miguel Ferrer, who was doing this in an uncredited role. So I'm going to make this the last point before spoilers. Yep, we're going to the spoiler alert early because there's a lot I want to talk about. So I'll round off with a couple of points here. Firstly, I'm going to reiterate that this is better than you would think, or better than you would remember. Mick Garris's direction here is different from his other stuff in that it's quite restrained, it's quite patient, and it focuses on atmosphere and on dread, and doesn't just rely on the campy, pulpy stuff that he is perhaps best known for. And it works really well in this context. And like I say, definitely better than you might remember. I rewatched this to do this video for the first time in years. Definitely found it to be the case. I really enjoyed going back to this and watching this over 3 consecutive nights. Now second, I think actually it's wholly unfair to compare this miniseries to the Kubrick version. And before you start typing in the comments, I fucking know I've been doing that throughout this video. It's very difficult not to, but I want to stress this as a point. Even if I continue to compare the two in the rest of this video, it's very unfair to do so. They are chalk and cheese. One is a movie inspired by, quite loosely, a book. This one is a proper adaptation of that book, a much more faithful telling of that story. They're effectively 2 different stories. Like I said, chalk and cheese, very different things. Now, the problem comes that when you're trying to compare the two, I mean, how on earth would you expect a mid-90s network TV miniseries to even come close to holding a candle to an absolute masterclass and masterpiece of pop culture? Like, that's just not a fair fight at all. They are 2 separate beings, they can both exist, they both have their merits, they both have their flaws, and like the Kubrick version, this miniseries is absolutely worth watching. Okay, from this point on, going to be sharing a few things that might ruin a first time watch, like some of my favourite scenes, all of that kind of stuff. So consider this your spoiler alert. If you want to bail here, skip ahead to the outro, the timestamp will be below, or you can leave altogether, but do come back soon. Otherwise, stick around because I've got a few more reasons for you to watch the Shining miniseries coming right up. So I like to compare how close these adaptations are to the books in these videos. It's usually the first thing I do after the spoiler alert. Now obviously, this is close to the book. That was the whole point of this miniseries being made. And I guess the case in point for that is what I labelled in my notes while watching this as Chekhov's boiler. So you know about Chekhov's gun. You see a gun in the first act, it's got to be fired by the third act, right? This is Chekhov's boiler, or King's boiler. We start the whole miniseries looking at the boiler, and the boiler keeps popping up throughout. And if you know the story, well, you know that the boiler is going to lead us to an explosive finale. And they do that here, and it's very satisfying. So something very different in this series is that we actually get to see Tony, Danny's imaginary friend. Yeah, we actually get to see him. And he is...
Hi, Doc.
really annoying. Not as annoying as Courtland Mead, though. Close, but not as annoying. Go fuck yourself, Courtland Mead.
Will you stop with that crap?
I say that mainly in jest. He was a child actor. It's not really fair for me to say that, but also... fucking hell. Now there are moments in this where you might think that certain iconic scenes from the Kubrick version, there I go comparing them again, but there are moments where you think that some of those scenes might get recreated here. So we get the family talking about the Donner party in the car, we get Jack being locked in the larder, we get Red Rum. But Garris here is always able to just twist them off and send them down his own path. Case in point being where Wendy does get to do some physical damage to Jack. There's no baseball bat here. She boops him on the head with a croquet ball. And it's pretty hilarious, but also quite well earned in that particular scene.
I don't want to
To be right back.
Nice shot, Wendy. Now, of course, the iconic moment that people would be looking out for is Jack popping his head through the door, and I think they handle it pretty well here. There's no attempt to use an axe, no attempt to do the "here's Johnny," just a quick, simple boo. So when it comes to favourite scenes, I like to pick out my favourite scenes from these adaptations. I'm going to pick one from each episode for this. Starting with episode 1, and for me, it's the wasp's nest coming back to life, which is one of my favourite scenes in the entire book, and I think it's done very well here. Particularly seeing how confused by it all Jack is. Like, he killed that fucker. How on earth have those wasps come back to life? It just kind of hints at the power of the hotel and gives you a flavour of what might be coming down the line. Now for part 2, it's the hedge animals, although I should be specific here, it's the hedge animals where Jack is out in the snow and they're kind of shedding themselves of the snow, and every time he looks away they get closer. That scene is brilliant. The camera work is superb. It is so tense and so terrifying. That's my favourite scene. I should point out that I am not advocating for the CGI hedge animals at the end of part 2. Absolutely not. For part 3, my favourite bit, it's Jack's redemption. It's where he fights the hotel, he tells Danny to run, he refuses to dump the boiler, and he lets that fucker explode. Yes, that's the whole point of making the miniseries. And they did it without it being cheesy. It worked. Good job.
Danny, run away quick! Run away quick!
As for my favourite line, I'll admit I did find the script a bit flat, but I did enjoy Jack's clever use of road rage and asking people to read between the lines.
Hey, read between the lines, pal!
Might borrow that myself. So when it comes to Easter eggs, links to other King adaptations among the cast and crew, and references to King stuff, well, it's a Mick Garris adaptation, so there are quite a few. Let's strap in, shall we? I'm going to even refer to my list just to try and make it a bit smoother. So, Mick Garris, of course, also made Sleepwalkers, The Stand, Quicksilver Highway, and would go on to do Riding the Bullet, Desperation and Bag of Bones. Cynthia Garris was basically in all of those. I haven't even bothered writing down which one she was and wasn't in. And we get a King cameo, of course, and that King cameo character is called Gage Creed, I've already mentioned, and that is a character from Pet Sematary. Going back to the cast and crew, Nicholas Pike did the music for this, and he was also a Garris go-to. Then we've got Steven Webber, who is also in the Desperation miniseries. He's also in an episode of the Nightmares and Dreamscapes miniseries, and he would go on to do an audio book of it. So I mentioned that Frank Darabont is hidden somewhere in the party. He obviously made Shawshank Redemption and would go on to do The Green Mile and The Mist. Got Michael O'Neill, who plays the Doctor in this. He would later feature in 11/22/63. Obviously Miguel Ferrer, who taken that uncredited role. We saw him in The Stand and The Night Flyer. And I think that is everything from the cast and crew. So on to Easter eggs then. Did you... pretty sure you did because it was fucking obvious, but did you notice Halloran's car? Yeah, he said it was a 59. He said it was called Bessie. Come on, Halloran. That is Christine. I'm not having anything else. While we're talking cars, did you notice Jack's registration plate? TRI019. Lovely, bit of 19. While we're talking 19s, did you clock that the hotel was built in 1909? 1 plus 9 is 10, plus 0 is 10, plus 9 is 19. Very good. The cowboy wallpaper in the bedroom where Danny's staying in the hotel kind of reminded me of the cowboy wallpaper on the walls of Frank Dodd in The Dead Zone, only he was an adult, so that was a bit weird. And lastly, those CGI hedge animals that I I'm not a fan of. But surely, they are just an homage to the CGI Langoliers, right? Finally, let's talk about the ending, which does leave something of a sour taste because, frankly, it's shite and it has nothing to do with the book. So we fast forward 10 years and we see Danny graduating high school, top of his class, all of these grades. And then, of course, he sees the ghost of his father on stage and blows kisses to him and stuff.
I love you. That's what I've been missing.
Standing on stage during everyone else's graduation. Like, get the fuck off the stage, kid. It's not just about you. And then after that wishy-washy, happy, crappy nonsense, we then jump to the actual ending, which is kind of an attempt of a stinger and a little sign showing that the Overlook is coming back soon under new management. Like, just leave it with the thing exploding, guys. That you had it right there, honestly. However, bad ending aside, and that's kind of fitting for a Stephen King adaptation, I guess, this is worth watching and it is worthy of the time investment, honestly. Okay, there we go, 19 reasons to watch the Shining miniseries. Let me know what you think of this one in the comments. How well do you remember it? Have you watched it recently? Do you prefer it to the Kubrick version? I honestly can't say at the moment. I don't know. I think they've both got their merits. I mean, obviously the Kubrick version as a piece of art is far, far superior. But when we look at it in terms of a King adaptation, it's much more difficult to split between the two. So let me know in the comments what you think. You'll also find a link in the description to my Stephen King quiz book, to my fiction, to my newsletter, to the podcast, all of those things. But honestly, just you being here is more than enough. Do have a click around my channel, see what else takes your fancy. Subscribe if you feel like it. Tell a friend if you're already subscribed. And come back again soon, because next time we're covering something that, well, after that you're never going to look at Gandalf in quite the same way again.